Hello? Hello? Is this good? Okay. So I got fired from the hospital that I worked at, and I went into blogging. So here I am. We're going to talk about blogging today. In January 2006, my local newspaper refused to run an ad that we wanted to run, and they said that this ad was too graphic. And all it says at the top is, "Excuse me, America, this is tissue," and it shows a box of Kleenex, and then underneath of it is an ultrasound photo of a preborn baby. And they said this was too graphic. Now, these photos are on, TV, on refrigerators all across the world, and Facebook. And in years past, decades past, there would have been nothing that we could do about this. They said that they weren't going to run it, and that was going to be the way that it is. But I had blogging. And so I blogged about what had gone on with this newspaper, and I was able to show the ad, which gave, visual validation of what we were doing. And I thought, well, that would be the end of it. At least I'd be able to blog about this. But I never envisioned what was going to happen next. Within 2 days, this had made the national news, Fox News. And so our original intent of paying some money to have hundreds of people see our ad, maybe thousands of people, multiplied so that millions of people saw our ad, and it was broadcast free. And because of that, the newspaper backed down, and they agreed to run our ad. And this is why I got into blogging. This is a perfect example why I got into pro-life warfare on the internet. The liberal mainstream media, or MSN, as we call it, has ruled national politics for decades. And let me explain some terms. Traditional media, MSM, includes TV, feature films, paper publications, including newspapers, and books and magazines. But within the past 2 decades, new media and social media have really been busting through the mainstream media. New media, as it's known, took off the ground in 1984 when Rush Limbaugh got into talk radio, and then Fox News came along in 1996, and blogs started gaining momentum in 2002, and they're to the point today where there's over 156 million blogs across the world, and that's just in the last decade. Social media got off the ground a little bit after that. Facebook was launched in 2004, and Twitter was launched in 2006. So believe it or not, Facebook and Twitter have been around less than 10 years. But the new media and the social media hold huge promise to impact going through the mainstream media and around the mainstream media, and I'm going to show you why. Fred Barnes, in a November 7th article for Weekly Standard entitled Hidden Persuaders, the Unheralded Gains of the Pro-Life Movement, said in one section that the pro-life movement is bigger is a given. It is also younger, increasingly entrepreneurial, more strategic in its thinking, better organized, tougher, almost wildly ambitious, and more relentless than ever. And those are all descriptors that include you, who are in Generation Y. And here's how you and the internet are helping make a difference, and you belong in the same paragraph together. Now, Generation Y are kids that were born between roughly 1982 and 2002, and the first high school graduates started graduating in Y2K. So that's about roughly the age group, and I think you're pretty much all in that age group, yes? You're also called millennials, and you're also called, as I mentioned yesterday, digital natives, because all you've ever known is the internet. You were born with chips in your brains. You know how to do things just, from age 3. My own 10-year-old grandson changed my Wikipedia page. It had my age as 67, as they do. And he got in there, my 10-year-old grandson got in there and fixed Wikipedia, and I didn't even know how to do that. So I looked up on Wikipedia, Generation Y, terms that describe Generation Y, and I made a word cloud. And you can see then by this word cloud how closely your genre relates to the internet and social media. 94% of you have cell phones. 97% of you have access to computers. You're technologically savvy on the internet, Twitter, email, Facebook, YouTube, MySpace, texting. You text more than you talk on the phone. And personality-wise, your group, and I'm not just talking about pro-lifers, I'm talking about Generation Y, millennials. You're very peer and community-oriented. And you also strongly believe in social justice. And I'm just, again, not just pro-lifers, but all kids in your age group. So you can see how your personality attributes, you know, how you are amenable to wanting social justice, blends with your savvy in the technological world and makes you perfectly suited to make a difference in new and social media. And so how much potential do these have for us? Mainstream media made fun of we bloggers at first. There was a famous quip made about us in 2004 that we were just guys that were jogging, you know, blogging in pajamas. But there was a big difference that came right around 2004 when the Swiftboat Veterans for Truth got involved in the presidential campaign. Have any of you heard of that with the John Kerry campaign in 2004? The Swiftboat veterans, John Kerry was in the service, and he was saying publicly that in 1968 he'd been on a secret covert mission to Cambodia on Christmas Eve. And the people who worked with him on the Swiftboat said that that wasn't true. They weren't nowhere near Cambodia in 1968 on Christmas Eve. You know, he was like building, you know, this biography that wasn't true. So they started running ads and they started publicizing that. They organized into a group called Swiftboat Veterans for Truth. They started running ads and the mainstream media was totally ignoring them. But bloggers picked up on the Swiftboat vets and they began running their stories and they began playing their ads from YouTube. And finally, the mainstream media couldn't ignore the Swiftboat vets anymore, but it was only because of bloggers. And it could be said that the Swiftboat vets, in conjunction with the bloggers, were what brought John Kerry down in 2004 and helped President Bush win. So it was only then that bloggers started getting respect. Now we pro-lifers are a totally foreign culture to the mainstream media. I don't know if you notice, but we have our own way of talking. You know, we call abortion supporters pro-aborts. You know, we just have our own lingo. We have our own way of thinking. And they not only don't understand us, but sometimes they can't stand us either. But new and social media have forced the mainstream media to at least pay attention to us, notice us, and seek our opinions on their stories. Mainstream media has really no excuse anymore to ignore us. And so because I blog, I've now been quoted by just about all the mainstream media sources, and this is just because of my blogging. It doesn't have anything to do with Obama or Born Alive Act or you know, a little baby that I held, you know, a little board, none of that. This is all due to blogging. I've been quoted now by the Associated Press, CNN, New York Times, Chicago Trib, Newsweek, Political, Wall Street Journal, I don't know, Washington Post. But it's not always good coverage, of course. For instance, in 2009, have any of you heard of Keith Olbermann? Yeah. He is a liberal, he got fired, a liberal commentator at MSNBC. And so one night in 2009, he named me the worst person in the world. I'm very proud of that. I now include that in my bio. But so, you know, you can anticipate that you're not always going to be treated kindly, but pro-lifers can and do go around the mainstream media and the abortion lobby in the same way that the Swiftboat vets did. And the best example I can give of that is Live Action, their undercover video stings. And it could be said, you know, Lila spoke yesterday. I hope, you know, everybody heard her. Her talks were just so inspiring. But she was right that it was because of these videos that Live Action produced that these are headlines that I pulled off the internet that, you know, that states are taking up defunding of Planned Parenthood. House Republicans took up defunding Planned Parenthood in the U.S. House, and now, right now, Congress is conducting an investigation of Planned Parenthood, which would have never happened without Lila Rose. And she mentioned yesterday, a couple people mentioned yesterday, that now directly because of those live action videos, Planned Parenthood just has been defunded, I think within the last year, year and a half. I think I counted 8 states have now defunded Planned Parenthood to the tune of $61 million. And that's totally, 100%, completely because she had access to social media, to YouTube. If she hadn't had access to that, her story would have never gotten out. But there's definitely room for, those of us who aren't going to be a Lila Rose or a live action. And we can play an important part in defeating the pro-abortion movement too. I want to go back briefly to a question that was asked yesterday on commenting. Somebody asked, what is the importance of commenting? And I wanted to mention that, those of you who may not have time or an inclination to get involved in blogging, don't really want to take this up on Facebook or Twitter, there's a way for you to get involved, and that's strictly by commenting. If you've got 5 or 10 minutes available in a day, you can go to an article, Google on news, abortion, and find an article, mainstream media, Time, magazine, whatever, and you can write comments that will reinforce the pro-life position. And you may think, well, that's not really important, but one of my favorite people, and yours, President Barack Obama, thought that this was very important because in 2008, the Barack Obama campaign hired 400 bloggers specifically to fight the smears, they said. The full-time job of these 400 people was to scour the internet and go to blogs and go to articles and comment on those blogs that were saying things about Obama that he didn't want said. So he understands the importance of commenting, and I hope that if you have time to do this, that you will just take a few minutes and every so often comment on articles. Another person asked yesterday, what difference can we really make, with social media? And one thing I like to point out that is, if pro-life presence wasn't on social media, if we weren't on the new media, if there was that void there, that the other side would fill it. And I want to give you an example of that. In 2011, just this past January, NARAL got this bright idea to have a Blog for Choice Day on January 21st. This was the day before the 38th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. And so when we pro-lifers got wind of that, we decided to have a counter ask them what they mean when they say Choice Blog Day. And we even stole their graphic. And in less than a week, we had 111 pro-life bloggers commit that on January 21st, when they were blogging Blog for Choice Day, that we were going to go after all of their blog posts and ask them, what do you mean when you say choice? What is a choice? And it got so bad that their hashtag, if you're involved in Twitter, you know that Twitter has hashtags. Their hashtag Blog for Choice Day that day, by mid-morning, we had completely taken it over, and they had to abandon it. They had to walk away from it. Up until that point, they were tweeting, hashtag Blog for Choice Day. They had to try, then they tried a new tweet, hashtag Tweet for Choice Day, and we completely took that over as well. And so what if we hadn't been there? I compare my online presence to attendance at a megachurch. I'm Protestant and I attend a megachurch. My church gets somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 people going through its door on a weekend, 4 services in a weekend. Now, remember, I'm just one person. I'm just one blogger. Yet my blog gets just about as much traffic in one day as my church gets on an entire weekend. Now, here's a photo of Mark Zuckerberg, and he was speaking to a crowd of 10,000 earlier this year at Brigham Young University. That's how many people I get on my blog in one day. Now, and I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, and so between the followers I have on Twitter and Facebook, I have about another 9,300 followers. And so when I blog, I link to my blog posts on Twitter and Facebook, so they get like double coverage. And so about 20,000 people read my blog every day. That's the equivalent. This is Joel Osteen's church, Lakewood Church down in Houston. His church bought the Houston Astrodome. And so it seats 17,000 people. This is how many people that my blog gets between my blog and Twitter and Facebook on a daily basis. Now, I was pretty impressed with myself, when I was putting together this PowerPoint presentation. Wow, I attract a lot of people. But then I read Live Action's Facebook page. And when I put this PowerPoint presentation together earlier this week, Live Action had 168,000 followers. And last time I checked it last night, it was up to 175,000, followers. Live Action is just going gangbusters with Facebook followers right now. Woo. And I couldn't find a mega church that had 175,000 people in attendance on any given Sunday. I found Michigan State University, Michigan Stadium, that holds 110,000 people. But that's still not as big as the amount of people that Live Action gets that have liked Live Action's Facebook page. So the closest stadium that I could find that would compare was Mayday Stadium, that's in North Korea, and that holds 150,000 people. But the closest I could actually find to Live Action's comparison was somebody I'm not a real fan of, as you know by now, Barack Obama. In 2008, he gave a speech in Berlin, and he attracted about 200,000 people. Now, the point I'm wanting you to see by all of this, these comparisons, and actually seeing the people on the screen, is to get you to see that you, as one pro-lifer, potentially have as much power to reach people on the internet as Barack Obama did in Berlin. Now, there's some more examples that I could give you what you can do online with your blog or with social media. You can expand on stories that the mainstream media won't touch, and you can also post pictures that the mainstream media won't touch. Of course, you can post pictures of aborted babies, and they just won't do it. But you can post other pictures as well. Now, in June of 2005, a Kansas pro-lifer emailed me, and she told me this horrific story of an abortionist that was not only killing babies, but eating aborted babies. The pro-lifer to her email attached pictures of the abortion mill that an insider, somebody who worked at the mill, had taken, including a photo of preborn babies in bags, in plastic containers, and in bags in this man's office. This refrigerator was in his office, and his desk was right next to it, and somebody who worked for him testified under oath that she saw him stirring fetuses into his soup at lunch. Now, I wrote a column about this incident, and then I wrote a post, and then I also wrote a column for WorldNet Daily, and WorldNet Daily also picked it up as a news story, and before we knew it, Drudge had linked to this story. And when you get linked by Drudge Report, it's a very big deal. You can just about count on your blog, shutting down for all the traffic that you're going to get. But I know that this story would not have had any impact. You would have not even had me telling you about this story today if we hadn't been able to post this on the internet. Another area where pro-lifers can excel is by providing documentation. When Obama ran for president in 2008, as Reverend Pat was saying, there were points during the campaign that he said that we who were saying that he opposed the Born Alive Act in Illinois voted against it 4 times. He was saying that we were liars for saying that. And so we were able to actually post links to every one of his votes. You can see down there in the bottom, I think that says 2001. We posted links to his 2001 vote against Born Alive, his 2002 vote against Born Alive, and he voted against it twice in 2003, so he couldn't deny it any longer. Then his campaign changed tactics, and they said, well, he voted against it, but there were reasons that he voted against it. And then when Planned Parenthood of Chicago created this false front company they called Gemini Office Development, GOD, And they started building what they were calling a medical clinic in a city nearby Chicago, in Aurora, under the guise of GOD. They put false information on the forms, their building permit forms. And they said, even though this front company, GOD, Gemini, was owned by Planned Parenthood and building an abortion mill for Planned Parenthood, they lied on their forms and they said that they did not know who was going to be in this medical clinic. And so we were able to post that documentation online. That is still a court case, and Eric Scheidler, who's going to be speaking here with Pro-Life Action League, his organization is very involved in the goings-on with this case, but this still is being heard. We're still fighting them. And the internet also offers us great opportunities to do reconnaissance and expose the enemy. I have a fake Twitter account. I'm not even going to tell you the name of my fake Twitter account, where I act like I'm a pro-abort, and I follow 272 right now pro-abort organizations and people. And I get a lot of information by going to this Twitter account and reading about events that they have planned and mischief that they have planned against us. And it creates a lot of material, and we also can, last Christmas I found out about 2 different Christmas parties they were holding in Washington, D.C., called somebody I know in Washington, D.C., an activist, Randall Terry, most of you probably heard of him. He got his people to go to these events and break into these events and throw little plastic models of babies. There's some models out in the room I've seen. He'd throw them on the floor at this event and just create havoc for them. Wouldn't have known anything about it if I hadn't had my Twitter account. I mentioned yesterday that I was going to give you tips on how to find leads on the internet about abortion and pro-aborts. And so you can easily do that through Google. First you go to the Google search line and you type in Google Alerts, and then you click on the Google Alerts that pops up. And then when you go to the Google Alerts area, it's going to look like this, and you type in the word that you want to get alerts on. I get alerts on abortion, pro-life, pro-choice, anti-abortion, stem cell, and of course I get Google alerts on Jill Stanek. I want to know what they're saying about me. And so you have Google alerts sent to you. You can have them sent to you on a daily basis. Over there on the left-hand side, it'll ask you what email address you want these sent to, and all they'll do is send you every day, or even if you want to know, every time the word Jill Stanek comes up, I want to know immediately who's writing about me, and they'll send you an alert immediately. And that's kind of what the alerts look like. That's one way that you can find out information about, very timely information about the latest in the news and blogs on what's going on with pro-aborts. Or, there's sources everywhere. When I'm going through grocery store line, I read magazine headings, newspaper headings, TV shows, MTV, 16 and pregnant. Lots of fodder for us to write about. If you weren't here yesterday, by the way, I gave a little presentation on 12 tips, blogging tips, and I put that on a piece of paper, and so we've got that out there on my table out there, Pro-Life Planet. And also, I have another little tip sheet that I am going to hand out today, but I only made 25 copies of it, and it's just more blogging tips for blogging, Facebook, Twitter, just little random information. And one of those pieces of random information is, what time zone should you blog? This is just one example that I have on this sheet out there. What time zone should you blog in? You have to consider the geographical location of the area that you want to reach when you're blogging. In Hawaii, we have 4 major time zones: Eastern time zone, Central, Mountain, Pacific, and then we got Hawaiian time zone and Alaskan time zone. So the most important point to consider when you're wanting to know what area to blog in, when you set your theme in your administration area of your blog, you set it on what time zone you want to blog in, is what area of the country has, or the area of the world that you live in has the highest population. So in the United States, what area of the country has the highest population, do you think?
Pacific.
East Coast?
West Coast. Wait, the highest population?
Yep. Which of those 4 time zones, excluding Alaska and Hawaii, has the highest population?
West Coast.
Pacific.
You think Pacific?
Yeah, Pacific.
Western? Are you saying Pacific?
Pacific, yeah.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's Eastern time zone.
Uh-huh.
Eastern time zone, Central time zone is second, Pacific time zone is third, and then Mountain time zone has the lowest population. And so when I learned this about a year ago, I switched over my blog so that my posts are now posted in Eastern time zone, even though I live in the Central time zone. And so that means that when I have what we call a lunch break, every day a video, like a lighthearted video that we put out at lunchtime. And it used to be that it came out at 12 o'clock Central time, and now it comes out at 12 o'clock Eastern time. And I also time ahead some of my Twitter posts, and so now my Twitter feed is set to be on Eastern time zone, so that when something pops up at 4 o'clock, it's going to pop up at 4 o'clock Eastern time zone, which is the time zone where, and that's the time of day, aside from the morning. 4 o'clock in the afternoon is the time of day when people most check in on Twitter. It's like right before you're going home. And so I have my Twitter feed set up so that my tweets go up at 4 o'clock on the Eastern time zone. So you have to take that in consideration when you're considering what part of the world do you most want to impact. If you most want to impact New Zealand, well, then you're going to set it up so that when people are waking up in New Zealand, they're going to read your blog posts or your tweets. That is my presentation. Again, if you want any of my blogging tips, I've got a couple of sheets out there that you're welcome to come and get. I don't think there's any time for Q&A, so thank you very much. Thank you.